Everyone, welcome to this week's edition of New Mexico Sports Chat. This is Joe coming to you live from New Mexico, sort of live. Um, we're going to talk a little bit about the Super Bowl and some of the coaching hires. In my Super Bowl preview, what I'm seeing occurring is this game to me has the potential to either be a defensive struggle, something like we got with the Patriots and Rams a few years ago when it was 13-3. um, or I could see this being a blowout one way or the other, one side or to the other. And generally, isn't that what happens when great defenses come together in big games? I'm not saying that, both teams are top, number one and number two. I know they're both, though, top 10 defenses. The Seahawks defense, is great with takeaways, getting pressure on the quarterback. I really think the one thing that's going to hinder New England is the fact that they have not yet played a top tier defense until they got to the playoffs. And then in the playoffs, they have really struggled against, some of the more top tier defenses. And that's what they're going to see in Seattle. So they're going to see one of those top tier defenses. On the flip side, I think Seattle's offense is going to struggle. Mike Vrabel comes from that Bill Belichick's tree. He has lots of experience, as both a player and as an assistant coach with the Patriots in Super Bowls. Um, I don't know if he was with them when he was a coach, but I know he's got three rings as a player. Um, the other thing that I think is an advantage to New England that's going to maybe make Seattle struggle a little bit is a lot of times that 20-minute, 25-minute halftime has a really, can take a toll on a team and take a toll on their psyche, especially if they're playing well. So if the Seahawk offense is playing well in the first half, maybe they don't play so well in the second half after that long halftime. Vrabel being there as a player, I think that that's going to be an advantage. He knows how to keep guys up for that. He knows what Belichick told them, um, what to do, how to stay warmed up during that 25-minute halftime that occurs in the Super Bowl. Quarterback wise, I think Sam Darnold and Drake May, I look for both of them to struggle a little bit, at least early on, until they settle into their offensive schemes. Um, but I also look at them struggling a little bit in the second half. Um, and then Drake May making some plays with his feet. Sam Darnold making some plays with his arm. I don't, he's not much of a runner, but what I could definitely see here is a really little more of a wide open first half, and then in the second half, after that long halftime, I can see things settling down a little bit, and then the defense is taking over in the second half. I think whoever's got the lead at halftime, I know statistically they generally win the Super Bowl anyway, but I really feel that that's what's going to happen. I'm leaning a little bit towards the Seahawks here. Um, but I wouldn't wager money on it. I would just say that I think that things are going to be a little bit tighter there. Um, so I see that being, some issues there. The running game, I'm definitely going to give that to New England. I think their offensive line is slightly better in the run game and the pass block game. Like I said, I look for Seattle to get a lot of pressure on Drake May. Um, Receiver wise, I think these teams are pretty much even. Najigma Smith and Najigma is, top flight, future Hall of Fame candidate. I'll throw it out there right now if he keeps his career going the way it's going. Stephon Diggs is no, slob either for the Patriots. So receivers pretty much even, slight advantage to Seattle's offensive line, but Darnold got put on his butt like 50 times this year. So, you know, I do look for New England to get some pressure on him as well. And like I said, defenses, we can pretty much call this even, but I look for them to take over second half and a slight Seattle win, something like 27-24, 24-21, something in that range. I hate it when sportscasters, you'll see them on ESPN and stuff will be like, it'll be 32-26. And it's like, how often does that score even come up in the NFL? You know, so like I said, I look for this to be about a 3-point victory for the Seahawks. Um, but like I said, it would not surprise me when two great defenses get together that, we could be under 20 or one of these teams has a lot of turnovers and gets blown out. So that's kind of it for my Super Bowl preview. Um, now we'll get into some coaching um, hires. There's been a lot of talk with the Eagles hiring Manning, young guy, only 2 years coaching experience, but he comes from that McVay, LaFleur, Shanahan tree. So, there could be a full makeover of the Eagles offense this coming fall. Stoutland retiring is going to be a big blow. I think it's going to be bigger than most people think. I don't think Stoutland was the issue. I think the issue is a Howie issue when he let Becton walk right out the door without making him an offer. Um, some of the defensive struggles, Milt Williams said he wasn't even given an offer. He was just let go. So um, I think that there's going to be some really big changes in Philadelphia, not necessarily for the better. And then I think if things continue this skid, I'm going to say that Howie and Jeffrey Lurie are going to look to Sirianni and say, "What's going on? You're the head coach. You need to fix this, or you will be gone." That's what I see happening in the Eagles front office. Um, Clint Kubiak going to the Raiders, that seems to be a pretty good hire in my book. His dad was pretty good as a player, play caller. Yeah, he backed up Elway, so I know that he didn't get a lot of chances as a player, but that gave him a lot of chances to end up where he ended up. And then I really think Clint's going to be okay. I think he's gonna, hey, Dad, what do you think here? What are we doing here? So, as a head coach, as a play caller, I really like that hire. The problem with the Raiders is they have 101 problems, and this may only fix one of those problems. Um, I think they need a couple good drafts. They'll have plenty of cap space. I look for them to be very, very active in the off season to kind of help some with Kubiak coming through the door. Um, there's been some things made about Matt Nagy going to the Giants and, what was Harbaugh thinking, those kinds of things. However, Nagy wasn't a bad head coach. Um, and, we all know Andy Reid's the play caller in Kansas City. I heard Travis Kelce on New Heights talking about Eric Bieniemy dialing up plays. Um, I don't believe any of that. I believe all the game plan, everything gets approved through Andy. Um, so we'll have to see how Nagy does now that he's back out on his own as an OC. Will that get him another head coach hire, or does he stay in New York for a long period of time with John Harbaugh? But I think he can develop Jackson Dart. I think he knows how to develop quarterbacks. He was with KC when they first, drafted Patrick Mahomes. So I don't think that that's as bad a hire as some people have said. Um, one of the people out there that's still out there that hasn't been hired yet is Cliff Kingsbury, and that kind of surprises me. I'm surprised nobody has brought him in to kind of run a wide open offense. They, especially with what he did with Jaden Daniels um, in Washington. So I'm surprised he's still out there. I was surprised when I heard names, get tossed around that are being recycled. Um, what I can't think of his name now off the top of my head. My brain kind of wiped him out after he was head coach of the Broncos and um, OC for the Jets. But I see, and that's how much we remember about some of these older guys that are starting to bounce around the league as OCs and stuff and as coaches. I really don't see that that's going to be um, super super great. What I'm looking forward to is what does Stefanski do in Atlanta. Um, I know some friends that are Falcons fans. I really want to see them do well. Of course, not ever win the NFC over my birds. But, you know, I think the Falcons do have, something ahead of them. I think that Stefanski can right that ship, especially if they stay healthy. I think the key there is naming Kirk Cousins as the starting quarterback and letting Penix sit down and learn and get developed and then start. Um, Might as well go with somebody who's been there, done that, you know. Um, I know he's got a bad reputation, but anyway. I think Jesse Minter with the Ravens is going to be a pretty good hire. I think they're looking to reestablish that defensive dominance that they once had. Um, Not that San Diego's was super great, but I think there's a lot more talent in Baltimore. And I really think Jesse Minter can continue to develop those teams. Um, Sala in Tennessee, I don't see him being there more than a couple of years. I really, unless Drabel does something significant with Ward, I really don't see much happening out of Tennessee for at least 2 years. I think their defense will be improved because of scheme, but this team is really, really short on talent as well. Um, Joe Brady in New York, and I mean in Buffalo. I think that was mainly a hire to keep Josh Allen healthy or happy. I heard that Allen had a lot of influence on them keeping him. However, I don't really see that as something that is entirely viable. Um, the scheme was starting to look old, so again, they're going to need some roster turnover. They're going to need some get some help in there for Josh Allen. I was quite surprised to see like the Bills are still in the top five, being favored to go to the Super Bowl already next year. We haven't even played this year's. Um, I was surprised there were some teams. The Ravens are even in there already. Some teams I was surprised to not see them even in the top 10 or right around the top 10. Especially like the Eagles coming off as Super Bowl team, but we all know they have coaching issues. So I think that plays a big role in that. Um, One of the more interesting ones is the Steelers hiring Mike McCarthy. I think if Aaron Rodgers stays and Mike McCarthy's there, I think that's going to go a long way towards whatever Pittsburgh does next year. Um, he's a big fan of Howard, the backup quarterback, the rookie from last year or this past season. Um, so we'll have to see if he wants Rodgers to develop him or, is he going to walk? I know Will Howard got some praise from Rodgers prior to his injuries, so that's a possibility out there as well. Um, I really think that, his scheme is going to improve things. I think, but Pittsburgh is old. This team needs help through the draft, or they need to go find some young guys in free agency to help improve that team. And then Cleveland, the Todd Monken hire almost feels like somebody didn't want that job and Monken took it. I think he's going to be able to develop a quarterback, one of those guys there. I think it's going to end up being Shador Sanders. I think there'll be a big revolt in Cleveland if Sanders isn't named the starter or Dylan Gabriel. I look for them to let him go and also let go some of the dead wood. I really think they should just cut ways with Deshaun Watson and end that fiasco as well. I mean, it's not my money, so it's easy for me to say, here's 54 million, go away. But he's always going to hurt their cap. They're not going to be able to do much till that happens. The Dolphins, Jeff Halfley, um, don't know true. I mean, I know I've said that this could be a good hire. I don't know anymore. Um, but it sounds like it's almost becoming Green Bay via Miami. Um, so I look for some changes there. Um, some people are predicting there's going to be a big trade on draft day, and Miami's going to trade for Malik Willis. So that's a possibility down there. I think that would improve a lot of the Dolphins' fortunes. You don't have to worry about Tua being, is he going to survive each play, that kind of thing. So I do have to admire his competitiveness, but, I think Willis might be a better option down there. But, you know, he'll probably be the biggest name on the free agent market. Um, I look for Mac Jones to be a big free agent acquisition for somebody this year as well. So there's going to be some quarterbacks out there that have played well. That might also be an angle for Indianapolis if Daniel Jones isn't, recovering very well. I could also see Mac Jones ending up in Arizona. So there's a lot of possibilities floating around out there. Um, Mike LaFleur has not been a favorite of people in Arizona. I had seen some grades online. They're already giving him a D plus. I take that grading with a grain of salt. I remember, after Sirianni's introductory interview in Philly, everybody was like, "Oh my God, what did Philadelphia do?" So what he's done is he's been to the playoffs 5 years in a row, been to two Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl, you know. So, there's a lot about those. People were picking on Liam Cohen about his whole Duval thing, and look what Jacksonville did that kind of spited everybody. So, but I'm always willing to give these guys a chance. Some people are saying it was maybe a year or two too early for Matt LaFleur. I don't agree with that. If a guy's ready, a guy's ready. But we all know the Bidwells and ownership of the Cardinals has not been able to do a lot of great things out there. So that's all I got for this week. Sports fans, have a great holiday. Um, Yes, I'm referring to the Super Bowl. Have a great holiday. A lot of you folks are going to take off Monday and keep it a 3-day weekend. So have a great time, and we'll see you back here next week.